So the added activity in session 2, for those of you who began in session 1, is actually going to be the next step in what happens when you see a patient. So theoretically, keeping in mind that the virtual externship is something that simulates the task, or as closely as possible as we can, in a medical office that you'd be sitting in doing some billing or administrative work. Keeping that in mind, keep in mind that session 1 had to do with the initial process of actually, one of the initial processes, that is, of actually verifying that someone is covered by their insurance policy before you make the appointment. And secondary to that, assuming in the scenario that we had, assuming that the patient has been seen and needs some additional work done. In that case, in session 1, the patient needed some additional surgery as a precursor to that surgery, and after you have verified their insurance, you got to get authorization for the surgery. So that part of it is done. Okay. So in this phase, what we're going to get practice with is we're going to actually get practice with entering demographic information and SimChart. So let's move session 2. Here's the leveling summary, another recording. So just keep looking at it. So let's look at what we're going to be doing this session. And let me see if I can actually pull up the Word document that I have for session 2. That's not it. Okay. Going to minimize this screen for a minute, and we're going to open up session 2. So this session, what we're going to be doing, okay, I've already talked to you about the fact that we know we're using Simulated Playground and Bucks Coding Externship, but I also wanted to remind everybody, and this is really important, this will help you to conceptualize and to put into some sort of context the work that you're doing, but I always advise students to reference the textbooks that they use in the session. Did somebody text me something that I need to know? Okay. Keep in mind that it's important to reference some of your textbooks in order to keep things contextualized. And the main textbook that you would be referencing for this particular course is going to be Fordney's. So keep in mind that Chapter 4 are Insurance Basics. It reminds you of what insurance billing is all about. And on page 65 of your textbook, there's a picture of the revenue cycle. This is particularly important in this session, mainly because the YouTube video that you're going to be doing is going to be on the importance of the revenue cycle. Is there anyone online now that can tell me in their own words what the revenue cycle is? How about, is there anyone online that can tell me what the billing cycle is? Is that you, Scott? Go ahead.
Well, the billing cycle is the time.
You want to turn your radio or television
90 days. Billing cycle is 90 days, and then never mind.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about it. Does anybody else want to offer information about what they think the revenue cycle is? Okay, so this video that you're seeing on the screen now explains to you what revenue cycle management is and what the revenue cycle itself is. And I would also like for you to reference, when we get off the line, Chapter 4, the basics of insurance basics, okay? And look at page 65 of your Fordney's textbook. For those of you who might have your Fordney's textbook with you, if it's handy for you to reach for, please get it now. And what I'm going to do is, if it doesn't take up too much bandwidth, so what you're looking at here is the revenue cycle. And this is the crux of the subject that you're going to be doing your YouTube video on. And by the way, speaking of YouTube videos, if I see any more missing YouTube videos, you will not get credit for attendance. It is a requirement that you submit these. So those of you who've been skipping it, your last pass. If for this week, when I go in to grade your assignments at the end of the weekend, if you have not submitted a YouTube video, on the insurance verification process, you will not get credit for all the work you've done. No hours, okay? So the revenue cycle, this is what we're focused on this week. Okay, the revenue cycle is composed or comprised of the main steps in getting paid for a bill, for an insurance bill. And this is why I said, you as billers and coders, this is something that if somebody says to you, revenue cycle, you should have no question about what it is. So this is something that I'm likely to be asking you about again. So for the formal aspect of it, for the formality and the technically being clear about what it is, this is the revenue cycle. All right. The revenue cycle has 4 major components. Okay. Phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. In phase 1 of the medical revenue cycle, let me shrink the screen a little bit so to make sure you can see all the phases. Oops, a little bit too much there. So phase 1 of the revenue cycle is actually has everything to do, most of what you're going to be doing in this week's work. Okay, most of what you're doing in session 2 is you're going to be making appointments and entering demographics for 15 patients, if I'm not mistaken. So you're going to be really busy doing that. But one of the things that you will notice that's different this week, that's different from last week, is that you actually have fewer reports. Last week you had 16 reports. This week you have half that much. Okay, if that many. So from going forward, you're going to have fewer reports to code. Okay, but this week, oh my goodness, here we go. Let's pull up to where the revenue cycle is. Here we go. So revenue cycle, the most important part of the revenue cycle is patient registration, making the appointment, and pre-registration, in which a patient fills out their demographics, where you gather insurance information, where there are specific documents like notice of HIPAA privacy practices, authorization, a standard authorization to release information, and assignment of benefits. What is an assignment of benefits, Stephanie?
The assignment of benefits is what they can have done.
Anybody else have an answer to what the assignment of benefits is? Okay, something else that I'm going to teach you. Okay, or show you. When I show you this, you're going to remember it, that you know. You're going to realize that you really do know what it is. Okay, but here we go. The assignment of benefits, all right, is in box 13 of the CMS 1500 if you do it by paper. But what it does is it authorizes the insurance company to pay the physician directly. Now, typically in a physician's office, when at the initiation of care, when a patient completes the initial information, what they do as a standard part of the paperwork is they complete an assignment of benefits, an authorization for release of information, and assignment of benefits that is kept on file in the patient's paper chart or the paper portion of the chart, or a record of it is kept electronically if the office is strictly electronic health records. So the two components of this phase of the paperwork, the initial phase of the patient getting registered, a part of the paperwork, in addition to the notice of HIPAA privacy practices that I talked about previously, part of the initial phase of that, of what they fill out, the information that they fill out, has to do with signing an authorization to release information of any kind of medical information involved in paying this claim only. Remember, when it comes to the release of information and when we're thinking about patient health records, we have to be very careful about guarding the privacy of that patient and guarding that patient's medical information, or it's called protected health information. So the authorization in this context has only to do with releasing medical information that's necessary to pay the claim when you have submitted diagnoses and procedures that linked together mean medical necessity. You can only release information related to that claim. The other part of this authorization, that is a standard authorization that is signed, a blanket authorization, usually the authorization itself is a combination of authorization to release information and assignment of benefits. The assignment of benefits, who can tell me what the assignment of benefits is? Did somebody already tell me that? Scott, can you tell me what an assignment of benefits is?
It's what your insurance will allow your doctor to do.
Okay, anybody else have another answer?
Wow.
Okay, I'll help you out. I'll help you. Who's that, Alicia?
Yes.
I didn't hear you.
The signature that's required?
Right, the signature that's required. But let's read this. When I read it, you'll remember that you really know this, okay? What this says for the, I authorize a payment of medical benefits to the undersigned physician or supplier for services. This is called an assignment of benefits, okay? And below here, where this box is, in box 27, yes, when this is checked, that means that they accept assignment. And what that means is they will accept what the insurance company deems medically necessary and will deem the allowed amount. But without this, the release being given to the physician, or the release being given to the insurance company, the payment will go directly to the patient. So as a means of minimizing paperwork, and way decades ago, when all we did was use paper, we would have to staple on the back of a paper CMS form the authorization of assignment of benefits on the back of the form so we can get money. If we didn't, the money would go directly to the patient, and the main reason for this would be because the patient owns all the benefits of that policy by law. That is that patient's, they pay their premium, and anything related to that policy is owned by the patient. Without the authorization to release those benefits to a specified party, there's no legal grounds for paying the physician directly. So keep that in mind. I actually worked at the City of Hope, and we had a case where someone at the beginning of the revenue cycle, I'm going to minimize the screen now. At the beginning of the revenue cycle, this part of it, okay, where patient signature requirements, assignment of benefits, they didn't have the patient sign that. And the City of Hope deals with curing people of cancer, expensive bills, okay? And the patient got a check for $6,000 and spent it. And I was responsible for collecting the money from the patient, and it was really hard for me to explain to the patient that they were responsible for that, because they believed that them getting that $6,000 check in the mail was an answer to a prayer. So that was hard for me. I understand what the mentality is, but it could be hard. And it's not, when it's a lot of money, it's no fun. So the initial phase, which is part of what you're going to be doing, you're going to be familiarizing with yourself with the importance of accuracy and data entry in session 2, because you're going to be entering patient demographics. So phase, and this is part of the revenue cycle. Phase 1 of the revenue cycle is making the appointment, getting the insurance information, which you'll have with some of these records. With all of the records, you'll have a demographic sheet, and attached to that, you'll have insurance cards or insurance information, HIPAA notice of privacy practice, insurance identification cards. In some cases, with some of the patients that you're entering this week, you're going to have mock copies of insurance cards that look almost exactly like the insurance cards that you're going to be getting when you're in the field. You have to enter that information properly, both sides of it. The patient signature requirements, which includes a signature requirements would include a statement that the patient understands under no uncertain terms that no matter what happens with the insurance, that they are responsible for payment. That's an example of a signature requirement. And assignments of benefits, which is what I basically just went over, and the patient's financial account. So all this is set up in the first phase, and that's what you're going to be doing in this week. The next thing that happens in the second part of the revenue cycle, okay, this big circle, is the patient is seen and a counter form is completed. That's what you're going to be doing next week when you start putting in super bills. Everybody knows what a super bill is, right? And the information is posted in the patient account, and the patient is checked out. Now, for some of you who have done 6, 7, 8, and 9, or 7, 8, and 9 sessions, you know what this is all about. You've entered super bills, you've posted charges, and you've posted payments, so you understand this. Some of you have yet to learn this. That's the second part of the revenue cycle. The third part of the revenue cycle is that you actually create the insurance claim. Another thing that others have done. So the insurance claim is electronically created. Steps 11 and 12, the claim is transmitted or sent out electronically. It has to have a provider signature in some form, whether it's electronic or not. And then, as part of the phase 3 of the revenue cycle, you have to make sure that you keep on top of any claims that have not been paid. And this is why I suggest reviewing this particular chapter, because you actually get to be reminded of what you're going to be doing. This is going to be your job. This is something you are going to have to know. When you get hired, not if, but when you get hired, and when you're brought on, and some of you might be brought on from externship into a live site, when you're there, they think you know this. They expect you to know this. So take it to heart. When I advise you to review these chapters, like step-by-step, chapter 11, or step-by-step coding book, period, review it so that you can renew your knowledge. But essentially, this is really a very important part of the revenue cycle, because this is when you create the claim, you submit it, and then you start paying attention to where it is. If you submit it electronically, it should be paid within 2.5 weeks. I work for a physician who actually, I can submit some claims today, Friday. By Wednesday, we'll be paid for them. That's how fast it is. So you have to have a way, or the office that you work in has to have a way of tracking claims to make sure that you're on top of them and they don't get too old. Okay, I'll go through more of this next week. And it says track pending claims via practice management software. Practice management software is simulated in SimChart. Practice management software is different from EHR in the sense that EHR, or electronic health records and electronic medical records, have to do with the patient's clinical information and the care that you give the patient. The practice management system is part of that system. If it is integrated with healthcare, with the health records, the practice management system is a part of the system where you can make appointments, you can get authorizations, you post charges, you post payments, etc. So it has to do with managing not only finances but other aspects of the practice. Okay, so last but not least, payer processing. By implication, payer processing means that you've gotten the payment. Okay, you figured out down here in phase 4, you have figured out when the payment should be coming in. If it hasn't come in on time, you have a method of tracing these claims by contacting the insurance company, reviewing an aging, of which we saw an example of earlier, and it is in this chapter. So I'm not gonna take your time by pulling up an aging report, but review this chapter with your heart and soul. But you already have figured out that the claim is on time, or it's late, or you need to call an insurance company about it, and you got paid. All right. And then at the end of it, 5 is when you got the payment. Payment is received with an explanation of benefits, which most of you have already, many of you have, about half of you online right now have done this. Explanation of benefits, document and electronically posted. All this means is that some explanation of benefits, for example, with the physicians that I work for, when I get paid, I pull up that payment, and what they give me is what's called an electronic remittance. And what they tell me is that we have put this in the bank for you already. Okay, that money's in the bank, but what you have to do is you have to take it and post it to the patient's account. All right, so this is what you're doing when you're posting payments. You can also deposit the money, but also on page 4 of the revenue cycle, things that have some claims, some explanations of benefits that you get will have 0 pay because there's a problem with the claim, and you have to make a note of that. I get these every other day or so. There's a patient we didn't get paid, okay, because the patient owed a deductible, so we have to transfer that balance over to the patient and send a statement out right away. In some cases, there was some erroneous information on the claim that caused it not to be paid. In some cases, it was a procedure that needed to be pre-authorized, so it didn't get paid. But it's your job to monitor these explanations of benefits so that you understand that what you're dealing with in this revenue cycle that we're talking about, you're dealing with money. And what that money does is it keeps a roof over your head in the medical office, and it pays your salary. It buys supplies. It takes care of the patients. It's essential. So your job as a biller and sometimes coder is the importance of understanding what this is cannot be understated. You need to know what this is. So in some cases, you're not going to get paid. You're going to have to follow up on the claims. When it says balance due statement mailed to payment patient, that's in reference to what I was talking about. If we get an explanation of benefits and there's a 0 payment, what they've done is they have adjusted the account so that the allowable amount for the account is not paid, but is applied to that patient's deductible. Who knows the difference between a copay and a deductible? Go, Stephanie, are you raising your hand? Go for it.
Yeah, a copay is what you pay when you get into the office, and the deductible is what you pay for that full year, and then the rest of your treatments and that
Right.
are covered.
It's just like with your car, right? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do another one. What is the difference between a copay and co-insurance? Go ahead.
Copay.
Oh, sorry. Who was? You want to try, Jackie?
Co-insurance would be second insurance policy.
No.
Okay.
How about you, Stephanie?
That's what I thought as well. Like you
Okay.
have one insurance and then a second.
So let's talk about what co-insurance is. All right. So you got a copay that you pay every time you go to the office, and everybody knows that, right? But what happens is, depending upon your policy, a policy can be a requirement of that contract with that insurance policy is that as co-insurance, in addition to the co-payment that you would pay when you're at the office, there's a certain split in the contract that says, not a split in the contract, but a statement in the contract that indicates that there is a share of costs. So that for certain procedures, for example, the insurance company will pay 80% of the procedure, and your co-insurance amount would be the remaining 20%. So co-insurance is considered a share of cost, and that's something else that as medical billers and coders you need to know. Okay, this is information you need to know. Read that chapter, okay? So in some cases, the balance due to the patient is not only related to a deductible, but it could also be related to a coinsurance that they owe, all right, which is a percentage. And I know some of you don't know this off the top of your head, but when I say it again, you remember it. And then to wrap the revenue cycle up, to close it out, at the end of it is when all the payment is received from all sources, okay? Meaning that you got a payment from the insurance company, but the patient had a coinsurance and they had to pay that coinsurance. And once you receive that payment, $100 charge, it's an 80-20 split. The insurance company is going to pay 80%, the patient's going to pay 20%, okay? And once you have posted that insurance payment and billed the patient, they paid their 20%, what happens is you can close that account out, and that ends that revenue cycle. Okay, so now that was a quick overview of a revenue cycle, but I do want to show you something that I passed before that's earlier in this chapter to give you an idea of, let's go back. This is an authorization form and predetermination, and going back, basics of health insurance. Okay. Let me see. I'm going to pause the recording right now until this example outlines all the details on the kind of insurance that the patient has. Talks about what the copayment is, all the information. All this information, if it's not on the demographic sheet, has to be taken from the card and put in the system. Type of insurance, benefits, and numbers to call for pre-certification and referrals, etc. It also tells you what the prescription copay. Oh, this is a great example here. And then, last but not least, this is an example of a super bill. You're going to be posting, those of you who've already posted super bills, you know what they look like. But this is an encounter form that you use to pull the charges off of and post in the system. You get some real practice with that this time. And I believe that this is a ledger, and I think that your example of an explanation of benefits is coming up with me. This is an example of an insurance aging report that you would actually keep track of when you sent the claim out and how much was billed, so that you know how to, whether or not you should be running after the insurance company for payment. And let's move on here. I think I'm going a little bit too fast. What I wanted to show you, I'm going to leave it up to you I'm going to X out of here in the interest of saving time, but please reference the example of your assignment of benefits. Not assignment of benefits. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do too many things at one time. Please reference the example that you have of the explanation of benefits so that you're used to looking at one and the breakdown of what the components of the explanation of benefits are. Right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the beginning page of session 2, and we're going to talk about what you're going to be doing this week. Okay? So one of the things that I got quite a few text messages on last week that I want to emphasize to you for this week is this. The first thing that you should do when you go into this session is review a checklist of everything that you're supposed to be doing. This is where you start. Okay, you start by looking at this. This tells you everything. Number 1, open the folder, name files for completing simulation playground activities, access the appointment schedule and enter appointments for all 15 dermatology care patients and all 7 primary care patients. Very clear. Do not enter patients for chiropractic care. Okay? So all you have to do is enter the demographics, make appointments, and enter different demographics for 15 patients this session. Okay? Then you review the video on revenue cycle management. Now that we've had a recap of what the revenue cycle is, read about how to manage it and what it means, because this is what you're going to be doing your YouTube video on this week. Also, read this document on report coding tips. This tells you how to approach looking at the reports that you're coding. It is assumed that all of you know how to find codes. Okay? It's assumed that you know how to find codes because you just got through the program, and you should have gotten a considerable amount of practice in locating diagnostic codes and procedural codes. However, if you didn't, you can always use tools, but we're assuming that you know how to find codes. So this, keep in mind, okay, guidance on how to approach coding the reports who are challenged by it and may not have gotten a lot of practice at it. Okay? The main component, it's not long, you don't have to read a lot because it's assumed that you understand certain things about it. But and I got this directly from the American Academy of Professional Coders website. And it's word for word. I've made the reference here for you. And let's take a brief look at this. Okay. The main things that you have to concentrate on is diagnosis code reporting and procedural code reporting. And remember, you're reading reports. Aside from the evaluation management, which takes maybe a little more instruction and a little more detail. But basically, for diagnosis code reporting, use the postoperative or procedure diagnosis for coding unless there are further defined diagnoses in the report. So all you have to do is look at the report. At the beginning of these reports, you have a preoperative diagnosis and you have a postoperative diagnosis. Use that one. Look it up in your diagnostic code book. Also, start with the procedures listed as being done on the operative report. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do a scan. We're going to do a fluoroscopy. We're going to do an appendectomy. That's stated at the header of the operative report. It's stated your diagnosis and procedures. Use that one. And also, in addition, you have to read the entire note because there could be some things in addition to the procedure that is listed in the header that you have to code. Also, and this is very important, look for keywords. Keywords may include locations and anatomic structures involved, the surgical approach, and if you need a hint about what surgical approach, method, etc. means, surgical approach and the methods such as debridement, drainage, incision, or repair are the key words or main terms that you'd be looking for in the CPT manual to find this particular procedure. Always when you're reading the report, highlight unfamiliar words, and if you don't understand them, look them up so that you can learn. And read all procedures reported should be documented in the body of the report. Read the entire report. This is very basic, but this is just some guideline on how you're supposed to approach coding reports. Okay? Here are the instructions for scheduling an appointment in the simulation playground. And in addition, let's see, I'm not sure, entering demographics is basically visual. in SimChart. But let's go. We have evaluation and management leveling summary again, and we have an overview of session 2, which you can look at in addition to the YouTube video. But avail yourself of these instructions. Okay? Make sure that when you schedule an appointment for a patient, that when you're scheduling the appointment, there are 2 phases of demographics entry. The first phase is when you're scheduling an appointment when you're actually scheduling the appointment, where you get a chance to actually create the patient within the system. The second phase of demographic input has to do when you actually formally click the demographics icon in the simulation playground, which I'm going to go to now, and you begin to complete the entering of the demographics on that patient. And while that's pulling up, I'm going to go ahead and move on with further instructions. So I'm going to unhide these so you'll be able to see them. If you need to. Appointment scheduling, click this, place the PDF of your appointment schedule with all appointments scheduled here. Remember, there was only one file for this. I'm going to click this. This is where you submit your assignment. I'm going to go back because I want to get to the second part of this while I'm waiting for Elsevier to open up.
I had a question about the patient demographics.
Yes.
So I'm looking at it right now, and to fill out the patient demographics, you need emergency contact name and number. But
so where are you looking? Are you looking here?
I'm on SimChart.
If there's no, okay, you can go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead.
On the files that were attached with the patient demographics, there's no emergency contact.
So if you were in a medical office and there was no emergency contact that the patient indicated as an emergency, what would you do? If you were in a medical office, what would you do? There are a few things that you can do, but what are one of the things that you would do? Anybody want to answer that?
Call the patient.
You can call the patient, but since we don't have any patients to call, the only thing that you can do is type in there NA, or you can put any name in you want to. And that was a good question. Okay? All right. So these files, okay, so this is where the drop boxes are where you're going to be putting your work. Okay? These are the files that you use for completing the activities. And as you can, here's the appointment scheduler is first. And then you have demographics and insurance ID for all the patients that you're going to be entering. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It looks like there's like 20 people, so I'm going to have to change the number. So you're going to be busy doing this. But it's basically getting you practice at being accurate, reading a document, and entering the demographics. So here's the appointment schedule. And I'm going to pull up the PDF. And I want you to remember a couple of things, that you only schedule appointments. You only schedule appointments for dermatology and for primary care. You don't schedule for chiropractic or pediatric. And those instructions are stated. But the thing of it is that by default, you only schedule appointments for the patients that you have demographic information on. Okay, let's have an example of the demographics and insurance card that you'll be looking at. So you have everything for each patient individually. Later on down the line, you have them all together. But for Anthony Baird, for example, these are his demographics. You see for insurance, it says C card. This is an example of the signature. I understand and agree that all services rendered to me are charges directly to me and I am personally responsible. That's one of those signature requirements. Okay. but here's an example of the Medicare card. Okay, so you'll be using these documents per patient, and each one of the patients has insurance, has demographic and insurance information, and that is all you will be doing this week, except with the exception of the reports that you do, which are standard, and your YouTube video. So let's see here, and by now, for some of you may not have done this before because you started in session 1, but you basically to do is open up your SIM chart, and just a reminder that what you're going to see on the screen, you're going to see more on my screen than you're going to see on your screen, but because I'm an instructor and I have several courses, you open SIM chart. And this point that I'm about to tell you is really important. So for those of you who have never done this, make sure you pay really close attention to this so that you don't lose your information. This is like probably the second most frequent text or call that I get is from students who, again, you don't have to, you won't see all those, but you choose SIM chart, you choose Simulation Playground. Okay, so make sure you write that down. Always choose Simulation Playground, because you're pretending, what you're doing is you're taking source documents and you're adding them as if you're sitting in a chair doing medical billing. So you choose the Simulation Playground, and no matter what, even if you've been in here before, in the Simulation Playground, always click the top radio button, return to previous session with saved patient information, even if you haven't had any patients that you put in. Always click that. If you don't get in the habit of doing that, when you go in and click start a new session, you won't find any of your patients and they'll be gone. Okay, so you click start, and for entering demographics, it's really easy. As I mentioned before, there are 2 phases of entering demographics. The first phase of it is that when you first phase of it is making the appointment, which based on the appointments that you have here, you simply enter the name and the time of the appointments. These are 15-minute appointments for dermatology, and for primary care, they're 30-minute appointments, so pay attention to that. Let me close this. The next thing that you do after you enter the appointments for all the patients, remember that you simply press the print button and save it as a PDF, and this is what you put in the Dropbox. So you press the print button, you will, as soon as this opens up, sorry for the delay. Once it opens up, and you will actually press the print button again. It depends on what your interface is, but you will exercise the option to save it as a PDF. Okay, and once you save it, it will save to a folder that you have reserved for on your desktop for all your work in the internship, and therefore once it's time to actually submit your work, you know where to go to find it in the Dropbox. Okay, but in the process of entering an appointment for a patient, I'm going to pretend that I'm entering a patient. The visit type is always going to be a new patient visit. The chief complaint, I just put unknown. The first thing that you want to do, because none of these patients are in the system, so you don't really need to search for existing patients. You want to always create a new patient, and it's going to give you the opportunity to do so. I'm making up a name, Joe Smith. Okay, date of birth, I'm going to make that up too, and let's give it a realistic year, 2001. Okay. And we give, oops, it won't change it for me. That's okay. Any place on this line that has a red asterisk, you have to make sure that you fill in. All right. Always select the provider, Julie Walden, always, because we're mixing systems. We're using resources from one system and adding them to a system that already exists. So she is always going to be the doctor. Okay. Type of insurance is the type that you're going to get from the patient demographic sheet. Okay, so in this case, this first patient is going to be a Medicare patient. I'm using a different name, but I'm going to choose Medicare. And you use the ID number that's on the Medicare card. And you use the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, a fake Social Security number, or if there's a Social Security number in the demographic sheet, you put that in. Examine the form to make sure that everything that has a red asterisk in this section is completed, and then you save it. Okay, and the patient is created. All right, and then you subsequently go down, and I'm going to pretend that I'm making a 15-minute appointment for this patient. And I'm not going to put a description in there. You don't have to. And then I'm going to save it. And then Joe Smith is going to be in the appointment schedule. But what I need to see when I see your assignment is 15 patients on the appointment schedule. Once you've completed the appointment schedule, then you simply go to patient demographics to enter the rest of the demographics on the sheet. Now, in this case, I will have to search for an existing patient because I created Joe Smith already. Okay, search existing patients, and there's Joe Smith. His cousin John came in about 5 months ago. And this is where you complete all of the other information that is included in the demographic sheet. You'll see some has been completed because you did it when you were creating the patient, but some has not. And keep in mind that if one single asterisk is left incomplete, it will not save the patient and you won't be able to do a lot of things, okay? So make sure you complete all the demographic information as completely as possible. And the same way that you printed up the appointment calendar, once you complete the demographics information on a patient, and I'll pull a completed sample up for you. Once you complete the demographic sheet up on a patient, you would actually, we have all the demographics, you would actually print the demographic up in the same way that I outlined before. Print this up and submit it in a Dropbox. Okay, and that in addition to doing your reports for the week is what you have to do this week to keep you really busy. And one of the things that I did point out earlier is that keep in mind that one of the reasons that there's so much work is because it's intended to take 20 hours to do it. But also we want you to get enough practice. Let's see, I think that covers it. Another thing to also keep in mind, again to repeat, look at the checklist to know where to start and to make sure that you completed everything that you're supposed to have in a Dropbox. In addition, don't forget your YouTube video, but you'll note that there are fewer reports to do. So under each assignment 1, 2, and 3, you simply only have 2 reports to do this week. Okay? All right, class, that's it. It took 1 hour and 14 minutes. I'm going to actually stop recording right now. The